Worker Federation. ITF represents fishers working at sea and at land as part of the supply chain.
Yeah.
So we have
Oh,
the
yeah.
representatives from different angles of stakeholders. We are going to start by giving everyone the chance, the panelists, to speak for about 5 to 8 minutes. And then we are going to go in depth. I will start with some questions, but feel free to type in your questions, the participants in the chat box or the Q&A. So we can all be very lively this afternoon thinking about how to move forward after what we have mapped in the morning. So without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Mas Ahmad Santosa to begin your intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, Budina. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to present a short presentation on the topic of sustainable fisheries and eradicating overfishing and human rights abuses in the fisheries industry. Very short. Why is sustainable fisheries important? As I think you all know that there is a part of the G16 on high-level panel on sustainable ocean economy. President Jokowi is a member of the G16. We committed that we implement sustainable ocean economy principles, which are first, effective protection, second is sustainable production, and the third one is equitable prosperity. Why is sustainable fisheries important for Indonesia particularly? I think first, providing food security. Without we implement sustainable fisheries principles, so we cannot provide adequate food security for our people and for global in general. The second is ensure the availability and good quality nutrition from fish as a source of protein. The third one is creating job opportunity for sure. The fourth one is supporting the welfare of small-scale fishers. This now. And the fifth is protecting great economic asset of the country. And the sixth one is controlling countries' ambition to become global fish exporter. I'm sure some of the countries in the world have ambitions to become global fish exporters. And number 7 is preventing transnational organized crime in the global fishing industry. So in order to prevent, avoid the transnational organized crime in the global fishing industry, we need to have a strong commitment in implementing sustainable fisheries principles. And the last one is reducing marine waste, pollution, and protecting marine ecosystem and the climate. The threat to sustainable fisheries, I think we all know the threats to sustainable fisheries. We'll pass it on. If we are talking sustainable development goals, so one of the relevant goals is goal 14, life below water. If we look at the 14.4 by 2020, it says effectively regulate harvesting and halt overfishing, illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, and destructive fishing practices, and implement science-based management plan. And another relevant sub-goals is 14.6 by 2020, prohibit certain forms of fisheries subsidies which contribute to overcapacity and overfishing, eliminate subsidies that contribute to illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. And 14.B, this is relevant sub-goal as well, provide access for small-scale artisanal fishers to marine resources and markets. So this is under goal 14. If we look at the SDG global performance, under SDG 14, life below water, major part of the world still faces major challenges in achieving SDG 14. The world average life below water performance has not reflected its success in achieving the SDGs, including Indonesia. So if we look at the Indonesia's performance in achieving SDG target, okay, if you look at the performance in achieving SDG target, next please. Indonesia is ranked 97 out of 165 countries. So our overall score is 66.3. So it means that long way to go achieve the goal 14 and other related goals, for example, goal 16 as a sector to achieve an equitable development principle. That's important. That's the government. If we look at the policy, my friend Pak Eko will have a more authoritative explanation about this, but I would like to try to summarize the normative policy in Indonesia regarding sustainable capture. If we look at the law on fisheries, if we look at law and job, if we look at government regulation related to job creation, I think look at the next page. Yeah, if you look at the left side, I think normative sustainable fisheries is there. Normative. And if you look at the policy, the national policy, the instruments to ensure the sustainability of fish resources under Regulation 27, 2021. This is the implemented regulation of the job creation. There is fish stock estimation assessment, total allowable catch, size limit, minimum weight, and others. They are all there. The principle and items should be categorized as sustainable fisheries management of ecosystem approach of the fisheries management. And our government also is about to issue the policy, but we haven't seen the official policy. And the newly proposed measure fisheries policy, there is a 3 elements at least, but the question is, will we call it measure fisheries policy be in accordance with the principle of question actually, and that's the fisheries government concept in Indonesia. Now, second, to explain about the status, how our country facing the threat from the fisheries water. The first one is I think there are still security threats in Indonesia waters from IUU fishing activities. Threat to Indonesia's border areas. Threat of illegal fishing at the border fishing ground 711, North Natuna Sea, 716, Sulawesi Sea, 717, Cendrawasih Bay, and 718, Arafura Sea borders. And threat of illegal fishing in Malacca Strait, fishing ground 571, and North Natuna Sea 711 is due to its position bordering with Malaysia, Vietnam, and 9-line claim. This is according to the data provided by Global Fishing Watch 2009. And PAECO will provide an update on this. And the threat of Chinese distant waters fishing fleet in Indonesia's border 2017-2018 between that year at fishing ground 572 Indian Ocean, 711 North Natuna Sea, 716 Sulawesi Sea, and 717 Cendrawasih Bay, 718 Arafura Sea, and 714 Banda Sea. It's based on the ODI data. This is more recent data. Okay, this is more recent data. Maritime security threat map in 2022. Throughout 2021, IOGI, our organization, my organization, detected threats of illegal fishing from Vietnamese fishing vessel and Chinese fishing vessel, as well as threats to Indonesia's sovereign rights over non-biological natural resources from scientific research vessels and Chinese Coast Guard in the North Natuna Sea, Indonesia, EEZ. So this is the map of the maritime security threat map during 2021, and also this is important to be noted actually that based on automatic identification system, we detected Indonesian fishing vessels intruding into the EEZs of other country, EEZ or PNG. So Indonesia, we all know, has a responsibility based on the flag state responsibility principle, Article 94 UNCLOS and SRFC case, i.e. to prevent, deter, and eradicate fishing by Indonesian fishing vessels in all maritime zones, including the EEZs of other countries. So I think Director General PSDKP and Fisheries Ministry already responded this, and I think already processed under the administrative law enforcement. So next, besides, we are still facing serious threats on IU fishing activity from foreign fishing vessels and Indonesia fishing vessels. And we have a forced labor and human trafficking practice at sea, as already mentioned by speakers from the first panel. The challenge of protecting migrant fishing vessels are difficult to monitor because they are in the middle of the sea for a long time. The scarcity of fish resources causes ships to move further away from the mainland and survive in the middle of the sea for a long time. So this is the map in this presentation, this slide. The fishing vessel of Taiwan, South Korea, Spain, and China have expanded fishing by at least 2,000 kilometers farther compared to the 1950s. Generally, this is due to their national policies that support distant water fishing fleet by providing fuel subsidies and vessels. So, although there is no data on migrant fishers working on China's fishing vessels, Indonesian migrant fishers, illegal vessels caught in Indonesia. This is our experience, Echo and my experience when we were together in Satgas 115. So they employed Indonesian crew members, including Kuali 8, Puyuandu 831, Haifa, and Longxing. And I think most of them are victims of the human trafficking related issues. So this is the data. Next, please. This is the data. Illustrates. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah, this is the data. Illustrates a small part of bigger problems. This is only the type of an iceberg. But I think the point I would like to say is Indonesian migrant fishers are victims of human rights abuses at sea. So, root causes of human rights violation toward Indonesian migrant fisher. The first one is very short. Key international instrument is yet to be widely ratified, like C1188 and then STCWF, CPA, and International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of all Migrant Workers and Members of their Families. The second one is overlapping authorities and ineffective implementation of the existing law number 18, 2017, related to the protection of Indonesia migrant fisher. The third causes unequal bargaining power between workers and employers. This is an imbalanced power dynamics. And the fourth cause, misconduct within the recruitment and placement processes of migrant fishermen. Number 5 is the lack of monitoring activities and enforcement efforts. So, access to justice has not been achieved yet. And lesson learned from Indonesian government. I don't know this is best practice or success story. We don't know yet, that we don't claim this as a best practice, but at least when Pak Eko and myself were there, and there is some progress actually that should be noted. So this is lesson learned from Jokowi's first term of presidency in combating IUU fishing. The first one, strong political will or national leadership to deal with IUU fishing and transnational organized crime in global fishing industry, led by the president himself. He did it. The second one is effective coordination among national related agencies in detecting, responding, and enforcing IUU fishing through the establishment of National Task Force in combating illegal fishing, as Ibu Moderator already mentioned, Satgas 115, established by the President as a point of coordination, consisting of representatives of high-ranking officers from various relevant agencies, led by Minister of Marine Affairs and Fisheries as commander. The third, working with international agencies, particularly with Interpol, is very important, UNODC, and IOM. This is related to human trafficking related issue. And selected countries like Norway, USA, Australia, South Africa, and others, which have instruments, tools, technical capabilities, and experiences. Number 4, lesson learned, effective collaboration between Task Force 115 with state, national, and international, and non-state actors. This is very important. So we work together with Sea Shepherd, Oceana, Environmental Justice Foundation, Greenpeace, and Global Fishing Watch. The last one is actively participate in international networks which aims to enhance global efforts in preventing and combating IUUF. And this is a conclusion. This is my last part. In the issue of fisheries management, IUU fishing and human rights abuses still faces major challenges. Indonesia still faces major challenges, which require strong leadership to overcome all the challenges in order for Indonesia to promote sustainable ocean economy, which is based on the 3 Ps: effective protection, sustainable production, and equitable prosperity, that are based on human rights and justice principles. That's the first one. The second, the role of Indonesia is very important as one of the largest ocean nations, fish producer, and marine biodiversity spot, to lead the international coalition of action among ASEAN, G20, and APEC member group of countries. Number 3, the role of coordinating Ministry of Marine Affairs and Investment, Kemenko Marinvest, is very strategic in promoting concerted efforts in promoting sustainable ocean economy principle in the context of sustainable fisheries management, marine biodiversity protection as a valuable natural capital, and human rights protection toward ocean-dependent people, particularly marginalized communities, together with non-state like-minded actors. Thank you very much, Ibu Moderator. Sorry, I passed you.
Thank you very much. Applause for Pak Ota. That's his beloved nickname, ya Pak. Thank you very much, Pak Ota. So you can see from his presentation that the engagement of consulting firms and him individually as someone who has been very passionate and committed to the issue of combating IUUF is very central to draw some of the lesson learned, the experiences of trying this and that throughout the process of creating a more sustainable capture fisheries. What I can grab from your presentation is that throughout the years, the challenge may have been handled, but not necessarily getting any smaller either. So this is the urgency of us in this session to really think about how not to repeat what we have done, given all the data that's already in our hands, given all the efforts that has been advanced in the past few years. I think, as Pauta mentioned, the year 2014 was very significant for Indonesia. That was the very first time Indonesia set the ground really strong on combating IU fishing. And since then, the work continues. But now we are moving forward, moving ahead to not doing this only within the Indonesian territories, but beyond. So would like to hear now from Pak Eko. Pak Eko, you can share with us what has been tried at the regional level, being at the regional plan of action to promote responsible fishing practice, including combating IU fishing in the region secretariat. Pak Eko, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. It's clear? Okay, thank you. I'm struggle for killing my food coma after heavy lunch. Okay, thank you. First of all, let me express my gratitude to the coordinating ministry for Maritime and Investment Affairs of Indonesia and the Foundation for International Human Rights Reporting Standard for inviting Rpoa Secretariat to be one of the speakers in this very important and prestigious event. I'm today is not representing Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries. I have to underline that. I representing Rpoa IUU Secretariat. Next slide, please. Yes. This is my outline, but don't worry. I already exercised my note here. It will be less than 10 minutes, hopefully. But I will start with overview of Rpoa, what is the development, and finish with recommendation. Next slide, please. Rpoa IUU is a voluntary cooperation of 11 countries in the region. Consists of 8 ASEAN countries and 3 Arafura Timor Sea countries. I think ASEAN has 11, right? Country, and only 8 of them join with this 9. 10, okay. So 2 left because of they have no sea. Yeah. It was started in May 2007 when 11 minister met in this island Bali to optimize coordination and communication among countries, especially on MCS issues. Rpoa IUU also has 3 sub-regional groups, namely Gulf of Thailand, the South China Sea and Sulu Sulawesi, and the Arafura and Timor Seas. And for better implementation of the Rpoa IUU element, we also work with the advisory body, FAO, World Fish, and hopefully they are here and they can continue to support us. Next slide, please. This is our meetings, quite busy actually. We have what you call it coordinating committee meeting. This is the meeting at the level of Director General, at least once a year. We have 3 sub-regional group meeting, also once a year. When I joined with the secretariat, we introduced what we call it Rpoa IU consultative meeting. It can be happen 11 times, Pak Ota, to discuss some outstanding issues. Because during COVID-19, it is difficult to agree on something. If we met offline, usually we can agree on something. If we cannot solve it, I can run somebody to the toilet, talk about them, sitting when lunch and so on. But because of COVID, some issue, we need sometimes 3 or 4 meetings. And then also we have other workshop, focus group discussion, and meeting. And all of this depend on the creativity to get support from other sponsor. Next slide, please. This is our core element. This is our backbone to implement our program. Hopefully, if this core element implemented by each country, we can have better action to deter, prevent, and eliminate IUU fishing in the region. It also proved that Rpoa participating countries have a strong commitment to implement Rpoa IUU core element. I can give you some example. For example, out of 9 Rpoa IUU participating countries already developed their national plan of action to combat IUU fishing. And this NPOA actually refer to FAO APO. And then most of the participating countries also implementing and ratifying regional and international instrument. May I quote Pak Basilio this morning that one of the way to combat IUU fishing is by ratifying the international instrument into their national regulation. Next slide, please. And I like to report to all here, especially Pak Ota, that since you left us, 6 countries already ratified PSMA. So it's quite good progress. And some Rpoa participating countries already implemented catch documentation scheme. We inspired by the lesson learned from European Union when they give presentation last 2 weeks ago. Actually, the market measure is quite strong measure to prevent IUU fishing. Next slide. Okay, this is the recent notable development of our cooperation. We have 2 documents, the draft joint ministerial statement to renew commitment, the final document declaration on vessel without nationality. The second one is already finished, just waiting the ministerial meeting. The first one still have problem with 2 words. So 2 words, 11 countries is not agree yet. Not 2 words, even not 1 sentence. 2 praise consists of 2 words. 1 praise, sorry. So that's we try to have another meeting to convene each country to adopt that, and then we just finished conducting Rpoa IUU fisheries intelligence training. I underline this one to remind Pak Ota that he has a promise to me. An international workshop on advancing regional standard on responsible fisheries to combat IUU fishing, and we come up with these two way forward to establish Rpoa IUU intelligence network and to start discussing on the developing regional guideline on responsible fisheries. Luckily, we got support from USAID Asia and ATSI project for establishing that one. And Australia also just announced that they have MCS capacity building program that will run for the next 4 years. Focus on MCS capacity building program. Next slide, please. So this is just to show you the progress of each country in ratifying international instrument. As you can see, all country already ratified UNCLOS. Some of them ratified UNFCCC. 6 countries already ratified PSMA and so on and so on. Next. And this is the highlight that already implemented by each member country. Before this? Disappear. Next. Oh, okay, this one. Okay, before that. Okay, this is what the country already implement to combat IUU fishing, whether internationally or nationally. First, impose administrative sanction as well as criminal sanction. The second one, implement a multifaceted approach to combat international IUU fishing through enforcement, surveillance, regional cooperation,
น้องคนนั้นที่30ดึงคือดีมาก
diplomatic representation, and capacity building and education. The third one, strengthening national policy and legal framework and strengthen further national fisheries MCS and capacity building. I will not reading all this one. Maybe you can read after this. Hopefully the presentation can be shared with you. Next, I got this slide from Pak Ota. So this is your copyright, sir. So the challenges in combating IUU fishing still faced with several obstacles, such unresolved maritime boundaries, limited resources of each country, different rules among participating countries, and limited information sharing and new modus operandi of IUU. I think Pak Ota presentation already mentioned some of this. For example, unresolved maritime boundary complicated in tackling IUU fishing issues. And as we know, Indonesia and Malaysia, for example, Indonesia and Vietnam, they have what we call it unresolved area. And if IUU fishing happen in that unresolved area, who will tackle that? If one country tackle that and the other country will protest, no, that's what my water. That's one example of unresolved maritime boundary. The second example of different rules, for example, in Malacca Strait and in South China Sea, trawling is prohibited by Indonesia, but not prohibited by other countries. Yes. Okay. I already remind, this is quite difficult to explain, so I can skip. And this is the recommendation, but before that, this is quite interesting actually, this slide. I got this slide as a summary of our international workshop. You see that we can identify the gaps, what is the cause of the gaps, and what intervention needed. To close my next, this is the conclusion of my presentation. The cooperation need active from participating country and active and from Secretariat. So because this is voluntary, so there should be someone to remind everybody. And the last one is number 7. I like this. Develop a mechanism that can facilitate a process of punishment or law enforcement for trans-organized fisheries crime and fisheries related crime. Before I close my presentation, allow me to... Okay, in one of our Rpoa annual work plan, there is one work plan to evaluate the implementation of international and regional standard concerning working condition on their fishing vessel, with a view to address the gap for the future. So we have also activities relating to the labor. So we open for cooperation to implement this work plan. Thank you for your attention, and again thank you for organizing committee to allow our organization to present our activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak Eko. We are grateful as well for your support. Hopefully you can always participate in our next N4, yeah, the future N4. So we are now clear on what the Rpoa IUU has been doing, what they are trying to do. Thank you for shedding light, Pa, on some of the critical issues that quite sensitive to some countries, but two of you already raised this issue of unresolved border disputes that do have consequences to how the area and the actors operating in the in that territory will be managed and monitored and handled. So I think that part of the story, we are also open, yeah, to how then we can follow up. The other item that is interesting, also aligned with what Pa Ota has mentioned, is the need for sustainable resource support from international partners. I think as one of the world's largest producers of fish in the world, this note is interesting for us, so we can explore further later on during the discussion how we can deal with this matter. What kind of cooperation with the market countries, for instance, can be developed to avoid a continuing problem. I think this is also what Pa Ota mentioned earlier. This is the source of the issue with the SDGs delay in implementation. I've read it from other workshops that it is really concerning that something that's already committed at the international level can be so slow in implementation simply because we lack resources and commitments at the practical levels. So thank you, Pa Eko, for shedding some light on that. So now moving forward to Dr. Keo Piseth, Strategic Advisor, joining us from Phnom Penh, Asian Vision Institute. Dr. Keo, are you ready?
Thank you. Guys, can you hear me clearly? The internet is a bit slow on my side. Thank you, Dr. Dina, and the organizer for the invitation extended to me for this very important event to discuss such an actively emerging and urgent issue to tackle. And for me, I do not have any presentation. I would just like to share some of the key points relevant to the topic. And I will try to address the issue from the environmental sustainability angle rather than trying to go to the social aspect of the issues, because the issue itself is a complex issues and related to what we call cross-sectoral issues. It will require a more holistic approach to address the environmental sustainability of the fishery, sustainable capture fisheries. So, as already mentioned by others, by the two previous presenters, speakers, we already have an ongoing effort to combat illegal, unreported, and unregulated fisheries. And to me, the issues, are pretty similar, and some issues are also unique in a sense. And to address the issue, we have to look at right from the start of the even the before the harvest and all the way to the end of the product. I mean, as the quote already say, from fish to this, or we can talk about the from harvest to the product trade and the end market. And so when we talk about environmental sustainability, when we talk about sustainability of fishery capture, we have to consider from the source. I mean, the habitat. It's a habitat for those fishery resources. What is the status of that habitat, and do they really have the capacity for resource to regenerate? We have to consider regenerative capacity of resources. If it already go beyond the regenerative capacity, of course, resource would be depleted and it no longer sustainable. And so, in that sense, we see the issue that affect. If you look at from the habitat, it says we have noticed on the unsustainable practice that affect the stock, fishery stocks, and also the habitat, fishery habitat. I mean, for example, coral reef, seagrass, mangrove, and other seabed. That one of the key considerations we have to pay attention to. And most of the practice right now, we also pay a lot of attention on the in between in terms of the certifications of the products along. If you look at the WTO on the certification of the product, sometimes the part on the habitat protection really miss it. So we have to pay attention into that. So the problem I talked just now is overexploitations that really affect the fish stock and the habitat. And we also, there is another issue of bycatch quota control as well. And there are a lot of uncontrolled fishing boat actually from industry and also small fishers that happen in regions. And I will go a little bit into Cambodia case later on. And we also have noticed the one of the issues that is really emerging, and it happening actually, is pollution from what? Pollution including sewage liquid pollution, sewage pollution, and also waste pollution from industrial development, pollution from urban expansions, and pollution from tourism. Tourism is in one way is very good for income generation, livelihood improvement, but at the same time it really creates a lot of environmental impact that affect the habitat, affect the fish stock. And if already the habitat already destroyed, you would not be able to expect for sustainable fishery stock. So that are the key issue that we have to pay attention to: pollutions and also climate change. It also affecting the coral reef with the increasing water temperature. And so that to me, come to that point, the sustainable fishery itself, it really requires a holistic approach that takes into consideration different angles from the start, I mean, from the habitat, go all the way to harvest for catching what are called practices, environmental and social practices during the harvest, and also the practice at the end, the certification at the end. And solutions, I think one of the problems is also a lack of data. In terms of data, we need really first start with the science-based methodology for data collections. I believe a lot issue in the region this deal with a lack of data, scientific data, data management, looking on the stock. And then without any data, what you're going to do? What can you allow? What kind of species? What are the quota can be harvested? What species that should be protected?
or have a very strict controls. That one of the key considerations. A science-based fishery policy, it really required a strong data. And the second issue that we have to consider there is also certification system. Eco-labeling have been already in place, but there remain an issue for cost is very expensive, transaction cost and enforcement cost very expensive. It's popular in the US, EU, and other developed country. What about in developing country? And also for the small-scale farmer, how are you going to ensure that eco-labeling system can be implemented? And the product go to the market is also expensive and affect consumer. Is it really does it really effectively work for all the stakeholders? So we have to really consider to provide a certification system that really work for all, not only just for a small market, because a large population really involved in fisheries in the world. And of course, we need a very good collaboration regional. In Cambodia, we still have problem with uncontrolled boat. Cambodia is in the red. Actually, we have a red card, and the Ministry of Agriculture, I contacted them recently. They are amending the law and also reviewing the regulations, because some of the boats are not even registered by Cambodian authority, but they are operating in Cambodia territory. That's similar to the case that the previous speaker mentioned about. So it really registry system, the management of the vessel, really one of the key issues that have to be considered. And they need collaboration, transboundary collaborations, and also participation from all the key stakeholders, from donor community as well, and international organizations. And we really need to have a strong law enforcement for the controlling of the gear, because there are a lot of boats that come and do shallow inshore fishing that really destroy the habitat, and also create a lot of conflict with the small scale fishers as well, and also smaller mess side for fish, for resources catch it also one of the problem as well. So really need to have a good practical policy, and at the same time very strong legal enforcement, law enforcement team. And we other activity we need to do the marine protected areas. I mentioned actually in other event I also proposed that idea on marine protected area. We really need a very good place for protection of the resources of the habitat and resources for them to regenerate, to reproduce, so that these resources can migrate. Actually, they even have migratory species that go across the human-made border. So it's very important to have protected marine protected areas that is really well planned, well developed with zoning, proper zoning and enforcement, and inclusive, actually, without any social issues. And if possible, we have a transboundary marine protected area initiative that provide enough space, space large enough for the species, for aquatic resources, marine resources to migrate and reproduce. That's one of the key initiatives. And last but not least, but also the livelihood improvement, provide diversifications for the local fishery dependent community is very important, because some of them face with resource decline and they could no longer sustain, and their last resort is to use illegal fishing gear that destroy resource even more. So we need to provide alternative livelihood that would provide opportunity for people to engage in different livelihood activity and reduce pressure on resources. That's key areas for I think that for interventions. I think that pretty much for the point I would like to share, even though there are a lot of things that we could, there are a lot of challenges, and we have to do a lot more to address the issue because of these increased populations and also increased fishery trade to supply the demand. So with that, I would like to conclude my point, and once again, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Applause to Dr. Piseth Keo from Cambodia. Dr. Pisatkeo's background is in development and environmental management. So as you can see, you know, this issue of sustainable fisheries also span a very big field of study, yeah? Field of research, field of activities. And as Dr. Pisat mentioned, some area may require different kind of intervention. And he's speaking from the Mekong Basin, where the capture fisheries not only include the seas, but also the Mekong River that is very big and very rich with resources, where the livelihood of fishers in not only in Cambodia but also Vietnam, Laos is also important. So he raised an issue that some of us may have overlooked, which is the issue of habitat. The situation, the pristine condition by which fish can grow, can develop. Various activities. I think one precious thing I can get from his sharing was, oftentimes we forget about contradictory policies. Yeah, we develop tourism expansion. We develop development activities that at the end also contribute to the challenge in the sustainable capture fisheries. So thank you so much, Dr. Keopiseth, for that sharing. Now I would like to invite John Harto from the ITF fisheries sector. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Doctor. I think I got lucky on my seating arrangement not to have to sit in between the tennis match between Pa Ota and Pa Echo. And I think as the worker representative or the representative from a trade union, I don't have to wear a tie, so I got lucky on that front as well. Don't worry, I know after lunch is a tough slot. I have 3 slides total. I'll be short and sweet. I'm from the Fishers' Rights Network, which is an initiative from the International Transport Workers Federation. Many of you may have heard of that, but for those of you who don't know, we represent over 700 unions in 140 plus countries that covers 20 million workers. So we're a very large organization that has global reach. One of our biggest pieces of outreach is an inspector arm that inspects seafaring vessels and shipping vessels all over the world. And I work for the fisheries section. They've just expanded my role to cover Southeast Asia, but we're interested in this fishing problem from a global perspective. And I think we understand that it has to be regional solutions and bilateral and multinational conversations that are driving the change and driving the agenda. So I have to say thank you to FIRST. Thank you, Dr. Dina and Pak Basilio, for helping convene this conversation. We've been active for many years in the region and globally on fisheries, working with the ILO, working with various other international bodies, this Southeast Asia Fisheries Forum, etc. But let me talk quickly about my work in Thailand and then our work in the region, and then I'll go into some challenges we're facing regionally. The ITF started the Fishers' Rights Network in Thailand in 2017. Our mandate is to organize fishers into an independent democratic trade union to protect fisher rights, fight for justice, and fight for structural reform. Since 2017, FRN has become the leading voice for fishers in the Thai fishing industry. We've organized over 3,500 fishers, mostly Cambodian and Burmese migrants. So we've recently expanded our reach into 4 organizing centers in Thailand. We're continuing to expand to work in Cambodia and Myanmar. We're also looking to expand our work here in Indonesia. ITF's largest affiliate here is KPI, the Indonesian Seafarers Union. They represent fishers and they've been active in various regional bodies. I think the ITF thinks about this problem globally, though, So we've expanded our reach recently into West Africa. We've started working in Ireland and the UK. We just started a project with the ILO in Peru and Ecuador. And for those of you that think, how does that make any sense? The main sending countries of fishers for Peru and Ecuador vessels are Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines. So we're seeing Indonesian fishers pop up off the coast of Peru, for example, right? We're seeing Ghanaian, West African fishers pop up off the coast of Ireland. We're seeing migrant fishers all over the world popping up and talking about human rights and labor rights abuses. So this is a global issue. I think the ITF and the fisheries section is well positioned as a frontline observer of fisher issues and concerns. I think we want to applaud some of the efforts here in Indonesia because we need to protect Indonesian fishers overseas. The Taiwanese distant water fleets, many of the Chinese fishing fleets and other fleets that may or may not be illegally transshipping or illegally fishing, IUU fishing, are employing Indonesian fishers or other migrant fishers from this region. I think the Indonesian government has implemented some decent reform, particularly last week with regulation PP number 22 on placement and protection of migrant fishers, and really understanding how we need to get at the problem of protecting Indonesians on foreign flag vessels. So next slide, please. I think there's more regional cooperation needed. Regional problems really require regional solutions. This is a fragmented industry. Many players, multinational scope. What you have really is a race to the bottom on labor costs and overfishing. Those two problems go hand in hand. When companies and vessel owners and companies are trying to increase their profit margins, they go after labor costs and they push their fleets to fish in restricted waters, illegally fish, to try to do as much as they can to increase their profits. A couple of things I think we think that need to happen are continuing to track vessel movements and fishing activities. You've seen, especially transshipment at sea, but you've seen Global Fishing Watch, Ocean Mines, C4ADS, other organizations working off of this. Paolo talked about Global Fishing Watch data in his presentation. I won't review those specifics now again, but interagency cooperation, information sharing, and international tracking of vessel movements and fishing activities is key. We think working with large corporate seafood companies to pressure suppliers to follow higher standards is a way the private sector can contribute. We've seen a lot of big buyers in Europe and in the US and in the UK and Australia pushing their suppliers, auditing their suppliers to have more transparency in the supply chain, to understand that there's no forced labor or human rights abuses happening. We think that's a key area as well. The ILO Good Labor Practices Program is a good example of that. We've negotiated along with Greenpeace a vessel code of conduct with Thai Union, the largest tuna supplier in the world. Those are key initiatives we think can be important. We also think incorporating trade unions and fisheries associations into the conversation when you're talking about, policy or what kind of planning you're going to do, that's really important. But then also about implementation and enforcement. How do we really, we can pass legislation or we can put a policy down on paper. How is it actually enforced? How is it actually implemented? And the front line are, whether it be small local fisheries associations or small vessel owners or large fleets of fishers, the unions and worker organizations are on the front line and can tell you what's happening there. It's been mentioned before, but regional standards are very important. The ILO Convention 188, port state control measures, those are all key elements for the ITF. We think 188 being ratified, implemented, and enforced in the region would be a major step forward. Thailand's the only country so far to ratify 188 in the region, so that's been since 2019. I think we're looking for leadership from other countries, and Indonesia is a good place to start. The inspection processes and the observation processes are really important. I'll say from our experience in Thailand, the port in, port out inspection point is a key area where we think those inspectors should be trained on identifying forced labor, on identifying labor abuse, in addition to identifying illegal, unregulated, and IUU fishing practices. So those are key areas as well. Next slide, please. So corporate sustainability and HRDD, I think there's opportunities for collaboration here. So the question was, what steps have countries and companies in Southeast Asia taken to anticipate the growing requirements on corporate sustainability and HRDD? I think there's currently an increasing consumer demand for sustainable fisheries products that are not tainted by human rights violations or environmental degradation. Investors and a lot of the international community are looking at environmental, social, and governance ESG aspects when making investment decisions. They look to invest in companies that are not involved in IUU fishing and can show that there's no human rights abuses and forced labor abuses in their supply chain. I think really there's a financial and a reputational risk to companies. So they've got an incentive to change their operations and to look deeply at their supply chain operations. And actually with Thai Union in Thailand, our experience was they were exceeding 188 standards and demanding more from their suppliers, not because of Thai government regulations, but because their buyers and their consumers were demanding it. So there's a really interesting conversation there happening between multinational corporations and unions that doesn't normally happen, because they're saying to us, we can't get credible inspection data out of the government, in the 60 countries of the governments of all the 60 countries we operate in. Can you tell us what's happening from the fisher perspective on the fleet, on the boat? And we can't. And we can talk about monitoring systems and observation in a way that I think other agencies and other government folks can't do. You've seen the Modern Slavery Act in the UK and in Australia. You've seen the Tariff Act in the United States. The Customs and Border Patrol has the power now to withhold shipments of seafood or other goods that if they're being manufactured with forced labor. You saw that with the Uyghur situation recently. So it's not just seafood. I think, actually last week I was in Kuraburi, Thailand, doing training for fishers for Thai Union's largest supplier in the area, a vessel owner with 46 vessels employing over 550 fishers. And they said to us, we did an internal audit, and all 161 suppliers that we have in Thailand failed the audit process. And an internal company audit process is not normally that difficult to pass. But they're getting pressure from their big buyers in Europe, like Nestle, Mars, folks like that, that are saying, you have to demonstrate that your suppliers are meeting this standard. So I think corporate seafood companies auditing their suppliers and demanding accountability is a good trend. We need to capitalize on that. I mentioned before we negotiated a Thai Union Vessel Code of Conduct. That covers 9 different items, everything from occupational safety and health and training to wage and payment structures, grievance procedures, freedom of association and collective bargaining. Those are the types of things that are important for fishers and protection of fishery rights, but also are important to demonstrate to buyers that you have human rights and due diligence in your supply chain. And I'll just plug real quickly, the ITF has recently finished our HRDD position and are going to release our supply chain principles. Things that we're looking for from companies and from specific supply chains, and seafood is going to be one of the biggest ones we're going to be working on over the next 3 years. But really, I'll send those through to folks when we release them publicly. But there's several items that cover human rights and due diligence in the supply chain. Things like engaging in collective bargaining and supporting the freedom of association. But for the purposes of this conversation, establishing and/or participating in national, international, regulatory, sectoral, bipartite, and multipartite bodies to jointly advocate for and agree to standards for supply chain involving trade unions in the process. So those are the kinds of things we're looking for. So I'll stop there. If I have more information on the vessel code of conduct, if folks want to look at that, and we're happy to continue the conversation. But thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Applause to John Harto from the ITF Fisheries section. I think thank you for lending us your network and allowing us to connect with fishers activists around the world. As you mentioned, this is a very important organizations involving a large number of people, individuals whose daily activities relate directly with the capture fisheries. So some of the things that you have mentioned, you documented, is indeed very central to our follow-up activities. I think some of the opportunities in the market countries, some of the lesson learned about what has been tried to governments across the country, and it's also surprising to hear that Indonesia should play not only in the issue of sustainable fisheries but also migrant workers. Yeah, this morning we also hear that we are very central in corporations fishing vessels from Japan. Now we heard that vessels from in West Africa and operating in Peru, Ecuador is also comprising of Indonesian workers. So we do have to take part more actively in this endeavor. So we now enter the point of discussion. I would like to ask if someone from the floor here, I don't see yet from the Zoom, anybody from the room would like to dive deeper on what has been raised? If not, I have two points. Pak Indroyono. Microphone, please. So Bapak raised a few points, and then I also asked. Oh, Pak Yadi juga mau? Okay. Pak Indroyono and then Pak Yadi. And then, so you take notes, yeah, the panelists. So in the last round of respond before the press conference, we can hear further sharing.
Thank you,
silakan,
Prof.
Pak.
Dina. It was a very interesting presentations. Maybe to Pak Ota and Pak Eko, questions, very simple. I think this region already moving forward toward combating IUU fishing, and we are implementing many of those. My question to you, and also my request to all of you, I think, for example, there is already a coordinated patrol within Malaysia, the Philippines, and Indonesia. There is already a coordinated patrol between Indonesia and Australia. And Indonesia is also with Thailand and IMTK, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. They have a growth triangle activities. My question to you, what do you think if we enhance and strengthen this kind of activities to implement many of these our already ratified regulation, law and regulation? That's my question number 2. And last but not least, Dr. Ota showed us Vietnamese and so on. Maybe we may also start to have a coordinated patrol with the Vietnam in this. So this all in the family in our region. I think this also is a good activities that there are will be many of our patrol in Natuna Sea, South China Sea. We are working in the economic sector, not directly. Maybe we'll be face to face with the other issues. What do you think about this? Because we have this modality already. We might proceed, and I have Excellency Ambassador Ben here. What do you think about this? Because we have this already. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Indroyono. Prof. Pak Yadi.
Thank you. My name is Nur Haydi from Coordinating Ministry for Maritime Affairs and Investment. Question to ITF. you have mentioned about the mining agent registered, but in Indonesia many cases are because mining agents are not registered. So maybe they are an alumni of, I can say alumni, ex crew, ex fishers or whatever. And then they come back to the home and they take the others from their village to be a fisher. They are not registered. It is like a family, as family get family, or maybe they have a registration, but only in the informal registration, not in the for Indonesian context, in the Ministry of Transport or in the Ministry of Fisheries. So these are the common problems in Indonesia. My question is this only in Indonesia? Because you have the access to other countries, maybe you can share with us if this is happening also in other countries, or is it only in Indonesia, or if it is also the problem of other country, how do they handle it or manage or to make it better management for that? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pak Yadi. Thank you for those three questions here that we have listed. I'm going to add 2 questions. I think these are the deep dive of the points that you raised earlier. Number 1, the question from Dr. Piseth about data collection solution, because earlier Pak Ota and also Pak Eko mentioned that this idea of sharing data has been quite sensitive and not quite effectively done. But it's quite central, if one can imagine, to the monitoring, to the combating. So any ideas on how to push that or how to complement the difficulty in this area? And then the second question is really the question about the cost. We really have to really talk seriously, I think, about how or what action can be more affordable. Are we strengthening the incentives? Are we strengthening the sanctions? The two has their own consequences. Each will bear its own cost. But I think it's important for us not to put the cart before the horse, that we keep talking about we should do list of activities, but the resources is very uncertain. So if we can prioritize in the next few years to keep the energy going, what would be the best thing to do to enhance the enforcement aspect? So who wants to start answering these questions? Okay.
I would like to answer the questions raised by Indroyono Susilo. I have to note that Indroyono Susilo is what we call it, the idea of the Satgas 115, actually the idea of president. But the doer is Indroyono Susilo. Without his role, I think Satgas will not come like this. Doer and pusher, and the idea maker as well. Thank you very much, Pa. I'm glad when I hear that ASEAN already established the ASEAN network on air fishing. That's the start, good start, I think, for promoting a coalition of concrete actions in the ASEAN level. And I've been aware, actually, there is a joint patrol between Malaysia, Indonesia, Australia, Indonesia, but that's a good start. I think that's a good start. But I think we need to have a joint commitment to establish the command center in the ASEAN level and to share the information on IUUF detection. It's very important. That's the first one. And the second one, I think joint capacity building or training is very important. I think you already, you have already promoted this under Rpoa as well, but we need more joint training among ASEAN countries. And regular consultation, of course, but for example, so we have harder problems when we have border related issue between Vietnam and Indonesia. So, I mean, the role of the Minister of Foreign Affairs should be, what do you call it, more aggressive in what do you call it, in negotiating with Vietnam, actually, because in the disputed area, and I think the longer we solve the problem, and then every time we dispute about this, and for example, we need a professional arrangement before we come to the conclusion about the dispute. And it's been years that we wait for the professional arrangement based on UNCLOS, actually. Okay, that's the idea part. So I think the acceleration of the ASEAN network on IUU fishing to come to production of the cooperative agreement and rules of procedure is very important. And I think ASEAN network on IUU fishing should collaborate with the organization Rpoa to promote the achievement of the goal 14 in combating IUU fishing that we passed already 2020, and I think we need to start with better strategy to accomplish the goal 14 in combating IUU fishing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pak Eko.
Yes. Thank you, Pak Indroyono. It seems like ujian doktor. What is ujian doktor? PhD test. Okay, thank you, Pak Indroyono. Yeah, thank you for reminding us that actually we have coordinated patrol with Australia. Indonesia also coordinated patrol with Malaysia. The problem is only 1 or twice a year. That's the first problem. So for Indonesia, Australia, for example, Australia can increase the frequency, but Indonesia has problem increasing the frequency because of the cost. So actually, if we come back to the FAO Code of Conduct Responsible Fisheries, there is one factor, what we call it, flag state responsibilities. If every country can maintain their fishing vessel not to fish to other country, that's already helped a lot. And the second, I agree with Pak Ota that actually sharing information before coordinated patrol is very important. But the big question is, Pak Ota, do they want to share their VMS data? The common reason is the VMS data has different platform, so cannot be shared. No, I said we just develop interface, And as long as we are together, working together for what prevent, deter, and combating IUU fishing from country outside ASEAN, it is, I should use my diplomatic word, what you call it? It is, no, it is not really useful, but please do not take note on that. Because as you know, we as a member of ASEAN country, our fishermen fishing in each other water. So if we cannot tracking their behavior, it will be very difficult. That's one message from me personally to Global Fishing Watch at that time. I said to them, if you can show us the behavior of fishing vessel of our neighboring country, maybe we are happy to share our VMS data. That's the first one. The second one for Ibu Moderator, the regulation of each country is not allowed us to share sensitive information. That's the second one. The third one, actually, my message again and again, I want to submit to Ministry of Menko Marves and through Pak Indroyono also, because every time I speak in front of Satgas 115, I always challenge Navy and Bakamla doing regular patrol in the unresolved area in the northern part of Natuna, because Indonesia fishing patrol cannot go that far. So if we can do that regularly 1 month, I think your worry about the unresolved boundary can be reduced. That my second point. And from moderator, yeah, it's like eating something. If you eat, your mother will die, and if you are not eat, your father will die. Ibu ya, you choose sanction or you choose incentive. I think, in my opinion, we have to go both, right? In Indonesia case, for example, I believe this is the first year we implement administrative sanction, and administrative sanction has more benefit compared to criminal sanction before, because administrative sanction can directly toward the owner of the fishing boat. Before, if you are using the criminal approach, usually only go to the, what you call it, captain of the fishing vessel and other one, the machine operator or something like that. And what is the first question? The sharing data. Yeah. So based on that, actually I personally propose to use more soft approach by using technology, for example. As you know, the fishing patrol day become problem now, yeah, the fishing patrol day become problem. So we have to use other soft approach using technology. If every member country can share their fishing vessel data, that's great. And then of course diplomatic talk and more regional cooperation to discuss or at least I always said like this. We are using peer pressure, moderator. So the regional cooperation sometimes become a peer pressure to the member country. So I give you an example for Sulu Sulawesi cooperation at that time. There is one country left still open export Napoleon rice, for example. After we meet every year, and every country explain that we already close to export that, and then in 1 year the other country also closed. So that's the power of peer pressure in regional cooperation. I think that's all my hopefully answer you.
Yes, thank you so much, Pa Eko. It's very precious to hear your thoughts, your perspective. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Pisethkeo for your response.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Dina, and also thank you for the questions from the floor. Let me address two questions. First one on data collections. Yeah, completely agree that there is a lot of sensitivity for data sharings. I've been to numbers of events that always talk about sensitivity of data. But then again, you come to the point that just raised by our speaker, regional problem with regional solutions. What can you do if you do not have a genuine neighbors, a genuine collaboration in country? How are we going to solve the problem? And the data sharings also raise a lot of problem all the time, even within the national agency. They always say, oh, there's problem of national security, problem of this, problem of that, or sometimes they even say, oh, it's too costly to share. So eventually, to me, it's still as neighbor. Of course, there are a lot of conflict, a lot of problem, but eventually, only good neighbor that can support each other. So we need a good neighbor cooperative relationship, a more genuine relationship with one another. Without trust, what can we do? Without trust, how are we going to solve these transboundary issues? There's a lot of cases that fishery aquatic resources spawn, have habitat in one place and then grow up, go into another place and then being harvested by another country. And if there is no cooperation, the other country just destroy the habitat because there is no benefit. Then there's there would lead to ecological collapse or ecosystem disaster, right? So come back to the point. To me, I believe in a good neighborhood, the genuine and collaborative approach that each party, the neighbor, at the border provinces can discuss and decide what kind of data they can share, what kind of data cannot be shared. There's no way to share if each always it always involves risk national security. So that's my take on that. And in terms of the cost, also the question related to cost, what actions to be more affordable, sanctions and or incentive is carrot and stick. And core we need to the both approach. And there are issues that we highlight earlier, issues of IUU, which also involve international actors and also local actors. And there are cases that we have to enforce law strictly, but there are cases that we need participation from the small farmers. And in coastal resorts, a lot of fishery, illegal fishing activities that involve when farmers and local fishermen didn't want to collaborate. They all can always find way to escape. And also, plus along with the big institutions, there's the law enforcement cannot go to remote area; it's too costly. And some officer even collude with those farmers. And you know, when they live together for long, they also have that kind of personal relationship, understanding, and sort of like, oh, local people just do it for their livelihood anyway. Why have to put too much stringent enforcement on them, right? So it always need the participation from a local fisher
know what is right and wrong, what is really affects their own stock and livelihoods, and then they need their participations, and then capacity buildings and support from the public institution as well. There are a number of cases that we have law, but then the public institution don't really enforce law or not really strict and impose sort of like selective law enforcement on certain group, while others apply double standard.
Okay.
So to me, it's really farmers, are small-scale farmers, we need their participation. I think it's a lot easier to enforce law with the industrial level to the number, and they can be seen easier. So to again come to the point, we need both things and carrot and stick for law enforcement for IUU. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pisethkeo. John?
I don't think we have the same expression in the States about eating something and killing another product, but we talk about having to decide to split the baby, right? Very, very difficult. Incentives or sanctions. It's a big question. I'm not going to comment on that except to point to a good model, which may be the New Zealand regulatory approach. They started with IUU fishing enforcement and started identifying labor rights abuses and started sanctioning, and those sanctions and fines and penalties were paying for their program and allowing them to continue to expand, and that sort of over the course of time resulted in a deterrent effect. So you're not getting as many violations or as much negative behavior from vessel owners over time. But my question from my brother here was about manning agencies. Indonesia is not alone in finding itself in a situation where there's kind of a gray area or an unregulated situation. A lot of informal networks, friends, family, different connections, recruiting, right? And there may not even be a contractual written agreement. There may just be a verbal agreement. There's a lot of opportunity for exploitation in that sort of situation. We see that significant impact in Thailand on fishers being recruited, not having a written contract, being told, don't worry about your passport or your entry fees or any of the other things, we'll take care of everything. They end up on the fishing vessel, $1,000 or $2,000 in debt already, and they never escape that debt. It's very difficult for them to change vessels, even if they absolutely hate the work and it's dangerous and horrible. So it contributes definitely on the front end and on the back end to a forced labor situation. There's other freedom of movement restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. But that gray area is a place where there's lots of green, right? In the United States context, there's lots of money, right? So there's lots of vested interests in sometimes maintaining a corrupt situation or maintaining a situation that makes money for organized crime networks or other powerful players. So there's not an incentive a lot of times to reform that. But I think if you do reform that, places like the Philippines have had good success registering manning agencies, regulating it, generating fees, helping to identify bad agents and getting them out of the system and cleaning it up. It's never perfect, but that's a good example. So I think through regulation and enforcement, the Philippines has done a decent job. They've sanctioned, they've generated fines and revenue to help move the program forward, but it's a difficult question. And so we see that in Thailand, we see that in Cambodia, we see that in many places. It's in Asia, but it's also, it's endemic. In Africa, it's worse. And so this is not a problem that is unique to Indonesia, and it's something that we need to look at globally.
Thank you so much, John. And ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of this session. I think you would agree with me that we have been talking quite very openly about many things using different angles and different languages, some of it diplomatic, some may not be so diplomatic, but all of us speak on behalf of our experience, all are based on data. That's what I gather, which somehow also align with the findings from FIRST. FIRST organized this activity only after we do series of research and activities since 2019. So this is a culmination of what we have learned, what we have gathered, what we have tried to engage with. I'm very happy that these speakers in my panel spare the time to shed some more lights on the issues that we are still needing further clarification. I hope this is helpful for you too. This should not be the end of the conversation, but we still have session tomorrow to gather further inputs, also including to involve more of the artisanal fishers. So please join us again also tomorrow. Thank you so much to the panelists. Oh, you have to point short. Silakan Pak Eko.
Okay, sorry about it. First point I want to make for my close. The first one, we have to have activities connecting the dot, because so many support around this region, and sometimes they came by single of them, and sometimes the activities is same, sometimes duplicating each other. So I think there should be one organization, for example, like Kemenko Marves, who organize to streamline all the support to tackle these issues. The second point is, we understand that we have FAO code of conduct, port state, flag state, coastal state, and market state. Maybe we can add one state, human rights state. Or human rights state can be part of the market state measure. Thank you.
Pak Anta, do you wish to?
I forgot to answer your question. In combating overfishing and in eradicating human rights abuses at sea, I think of enforcement, especially economic incentive and enforcement and public control, that should be applied interchangeably in order to promote high level of compliance. But when we come to the issue at transnational crime, or transnational cases, it is more difficult because it requires strong diplomacy directly with the other country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As you can tell, this is a very robust topic this afternoon. We still want to talk more and more about it. But don't worry, there will be other sessions to dwell with this. Please join me to thank the panelists. A round of applause to them. Thank you so much. And also for the participation of everyone in the room. Thank you so much. I now give the floor to Putri.
Everyone, that marks the end of today's session. I would like to thank everyone for staying with us this morning, and we will have a photo session right now. Please come to the podium to have the photo session. Please come forward to have a photo session. Everyone.
Yeah, let's everyone go forward to have the photo session.
She's struggling.
Oh iya iya iya. Okay. All right. Yeah. Oh, but. Okay. Okay. On the count, 1, 2, 3. Once again, 1, 2. One more time. 1, 2. Yeah. We will have a press conference now.
Ini narasumbernya satu, Bu Dina kan? Bu Dina satu, siapa lagi? Oh nggak usah. Ya, beresin semua.
For those joining virtually, this marks the end of the session. We look forward to your presence for tomorrow's session on artisanal fisheries and also the breakout rooms. See you tomorrow.